I think I'll just make this live a bit early. How early am I? A minute, 15 seconds. We're on a Saturday morning here in Australia. Friday hour for you folks in other parts of the world. I'm a day late. I did mention it last week. It was going to be a day late because we've been in Sydney. And we've been in Sydney for a couple of reasons, actually, all related into one thing. So we have had Ari, our near 16-year-old son, who has been on this channel before for various things, doing work experience at a proper software company, which I think is a good way to spend his holiday. He actually didn't disagree. So we're here in holidays. Where are we now? We're like spring holidays in Australia. Remember, because we're upside down to everybody else, we're coming into summer now. So this has been his spring holidays, and he spent a week of that down in Sydney working for SSW. Now, SSW is a company that I've known, how far now? More than 20 years. Sydney-based company, but they've got a heap of people. They've got about 100 people here in Australia. They've got an office in France. They've got an office in China as well. It's run by a very good friend of mine, Adam Kogan, regular speaker at all the sorts of things that I normally travel and go to. So he has been kind enough to give near 16-year-old Ari a week of fairly solid work experience, doing all of the tech things that many of us here do. G'day, Funky Monk. James, welcome. So he's had to be there writing some code, learning what Scrum is. He came home one day, We've all been down in Sydney. I'll get on to the other things we've been doing then. He came back to the hotel one day and he's like, yeah, so we've been doing Scrum today. And I was like, oh, I'm actually quite impressed with that. That's good. Do you know why you do Scrum? See, I haven't, because it's just Stefan and I writing code. We don't really have to do that anymore. We basically just wing it. However, having spent a lot of time in a big enterprise, we did do Scrum. So I was quite happy to see him come home and do that. Been doing a bunch of graphic design stuff, web dev stuff. They had him doing some SQL injection stuff, which I was very happy to hear. Not sure how successful it was, but I reckon there's a career in that stuff. So we've been down in Sydney. I did speak at the SSW user group during the week. There is an online recording of that. I'm going to put that up on my recorded / websites. I don't actually have recorded talks, isn't it? / is it recorded - talks? Recorded. It's also early here. It's been a long week. Recorded talks. All right, I'm going to drop that into the chat. If anyone wants to find previous talks I've done that have been put in the public domain, they're all there, including, I'm going to go back to that actually, including the very first one I did at the SSW user group in March 2012. That was the first ever public talk I did. Wow, it's more than 13 years ago. I wore a shirt. Look at me now, I'm just like branded Have I Been Pwned merch. That was even before there was a Have I Been Pwned. Wow. That was a lifetime ago. Anywho, so that has been Sydney. Did the user group talk. I will put that up there on that recorded talks page sometime today. That was very much the same sort of stuff that I usually talk about. As a speaker, you end up reusing a lot of material just simply because I do so many of these. If I didn't do it, my entire life would go just preparing presentations. That said, I do have this new talk I'm going to need to figure out. Why does it keep prompting me there? For the Cybercop Intercop conference in The Hague next month. In fact, we're going to be flying out of here in about 3 weeks. So I better get that done. I'm going to be polling the community a little bit on some content too. I need to find some cool stuff. G'day, Joseph. Thank you for joining. Now, what else am I going to talk about today? I do have a list of things. Let me go to Twitter and find out. While I'm there, just because that's where I shared the social thing, I don't know if you've noticed, but Twitter has gotten a little bit weird over the last few years. Not least of which is that it's no longer called Twitter. I posted something on Blue Sky yesterday. Now, let me actually tell you what this is. Uh, I have been of the view that as things have changed with Twitter and X and Elon and everyone, that for the most part, the changes have been if you go outside your audience, there's more politics from the side you're not used to seeing on X. Is that a subtle way of putting it? I think that's the most non-controversial way I could put it. Now, I'd said before, I find that these social media platforms tend to start aligning around political ideologies, predominantly American political ideologies, which incidentally are quite different to a lot of the rest of the world. I'll tell you how I know that in a moment. And Twitter was obviously very left leaning, and then there are other things out there that are very right leaning. Trump's got his own one. There's Gab, there's Parler, both had data breaches in the past. And then you get the likes of Mastodon, where a lot of people went off X and then they went to Mastodon, and then Blue Sky popped up, and you just end up with this fragmentation. And a lot of people have obviously left Twitter/X and either gone to these other platforms, or I suspect gone nowhere in many cases, and they're just like, screw this, I'm done with it. And that's a little bit of a shame, because we've definitely lost a lot of the community that was there at peak Twitter, say, I don't know, 5 years ago, for argument's sake. Now, I would argue, and as I think about that, 5 years ago, first year of COVID, I would argue that people were more locked down, and the way we use social media was probably different then to what it is today, regardless of the fact that you've then got people disenfranchised with the political leanings of the way Twitter has gone. So, I have been trying to keep a foot in every camp. I've had Blue Sky accounts and Mastodon accounts and all the rest of it. When I say accounts, there's mine, and I have one for Have I Been Pwned. And for Have I Been Pwned, I blast on all of them, because I don't know where people are, and it's not hard to do anyway. And for my own stuff, a bunch of content has gone to all of them. But for the most part, as it has been since, how long have I had my Twitter account for now? I feel like it's like 2008 or something like that. What does it say? 2008, April 2008. And that has really been the platform on which I've been able to launch a career. So I've been very reluctant to give that up, and I'm not giving it up either. However, I have found the level of engagement, I would say, even over the course of this year, has just really gone down. Now, I know a lot of people go, but then I see a lot of political stuff I don't like. I see that on the For You. And to be fair, I see a lot of political stuff I didn't see before, which is obviously what a lot of people in America like, because someone voted the guy in. So a lot of people did. And there is a place where that exists. But looking at my Twitter now, if I'm sitting over there and I'm on home and I go to following, other than the fact I follow Elon because he's such an influential person, and if you take that out and what he communicates, basically everything I see here is still very tech-centric. What are we going to hear? Cloudflare, Raphael, another Microsoft friend of mine, dark web stuff, DHH of Ruby on Rails fame, talking about SQL. Like, I go through here and it's all still very relevant. I go sideways, left one, to For You, and it's like, holy shit, like this is now very different. Now, I have found it interesting watching some of that stuff, because it is very different to what we saw before. And I've sort of made the point many times before, I think we all end up in our own echo chambers of things that align with the political views of our friends and family, and we see the same stuff over and over again. And if you hate Trump, you'll see hate Trump stuff over again. If you love Trump, you'll see love Trump stuff over again. When you move outside your comfort zone and you see where a significant portion of the community is focusing their effort, you're like, oh, wow, that's not necessarily aligned to my values, but there is a whole other world out there. So, James blocked Elon because it's hilarious to block the guy that owns the platform. I was always before him getting X and going much more right wing, I was I really enjoyed taking the piss out of Elon. largely because I think so much of the Tesla stuff was hyperbole. Autopilot. It's not autopilot. It can't fly itself. This is why people crash into fire trucks and bridges. Anyway, all that sort of stuff. Not to mention the Thailand cave diving thing. And there's just like a stream of things that were kind of nutty. Um, However, you can't deny the influence of the individual as well. And I think one of the things you got to sort of accept, we're going way off topic here, but one of the things to accept is that there are obviously a very large number of views out there that wherever you are on the political spectrum don't align to yours, but blocking them out entirely I don't think is good either, at least seeing it. And particularly as things just seem to get weirder and weirder day by day, don't they? I've seen so many really odd things from both fairly extreme sides of politics, especially in the US. The Pete Hegseth stuff the other day, calling all the generals. There's so much weird stuff about that event. And then you see really weird stuff on the left side of politics in the US as well. And the one that keeps coming up in my mind, there's a whole bunch of subjectivity, right, around political views, and particularly when they get into religion and guns and all this other stuff. The one that really stood out to me is like, this is just an example of hyperbolic bullshit on the other side, is after Hegseth does his thing with all the generals, etc. This is still tech related. It's online. It's on social. After he does that thing, and then he's there with the health secretary, and they're doing copious numbers of push-ups and chin-ups and things like that. And good on them, they're fit guys. I obviously don't agree with a lot of what they said, but they're looking after themselves. And he's getting to like his last chin-up, and he's struggling as anyone would. And that's the image which you're then seeing folks on the other side of politics focus on to try and show that he's struggling. He's struggling because the dude's just done like however many chin-ups. Like, of course he's struggling. Well, why pick that to try and make a point, which is really the opposite? Anyway. So, Blue Sky. Where were we? Do you tweet on Blue Sky? Let's say we tweet. I tweeted on Blue Sky. It's going to upset people, isn't it? Yesterday, 19 hours ago, I said social engagement on the big platforms has really changed the last few years. A lot of people I connected with on X left. Mastodon never really seems to have hit its strides, and I do feel that. Like, again, I'm largely posting a lot of the same stuff on every platform, and I just feel there's just something about Mastodon where it's just not getting traction. LinkedIn has a lot more professional engagement, and Facebook has a lot more casual stuff. How are you all finding Blue Sky? And then I went on to say I'm going to try posting more here that previously would have gone to X when there was a more active audience. Hope some of the engagement I saw over there for so many years has simply moved here. Let's see. And to touch on that sort of LinkedIn and X side of things, or rather LinkedIn and Facebook side of things, I didn't realize how many followers I have on LinkedIn. They're like 50,000 or something like that. I didn't realize that there was that much traction. So I've started posting things like on the Have I Been Pwned page when there's a new data breach. And when I say started, months ago, this year. Started posting when I do these live streams and things like that. And it's been good, but that is obviously a much more professional audience. I've started to use Facebook more. Facebook confuses me. I think my profile is now a page of intentionally made stuff public. I post a lot of stuff public there, particularly around things like travel, because that also crosses over with my friend groups, like my social friend groups. But I think what I'm going to try and do is, as well as posting across all these platforms, I'm using Buffer to post across multiple platforms when I say make a blog post, which I think Buffer's good. I'm just not convinced about a few things. I think I'm going to take a lot more of the here's a beer or a sunset or a dolphin on the Gold Coast stuff that might have gone to X in the past, and I'll try giving that a run on Blue Sky, and we'll see. I'm conscious that I'm just going to another platform that is leaning politically in a different direction for the large part. So it's kind of like wherever you go, there's going to be a bias to the audience. And I actually think a lot of the audience is not aware there's a bias too. They're like, no, there's no bias. We're normal. Everyone else is strange. I thought, no, you've all got a bias. Richard's here. I have far more followers on Twitter, but more engagement on Blue Sky. Yeah, well, I think we're getting to that point because I've got, where is it? 200 and let's call it 241,000 followers on Twitter. And then on Blue Sky, I've got 15 and a half. Now, having said that, I haven't been using Blue Sky really extensively. So let's see if I start using it the same way I started using or was using X. We'll see if we get more traction on that. And that might be interesting. See if that works. So James says, have you enabled Federation in Blue Sky that people can follow your BS account from Mastodon? Oh, okay. BS is Blue Sky. All right. I got you now. Got you. Neil's here from the UK. Last time I was in our part of the world is getting really nice now. It's sunny. Mind you, it's 14 degrees Celsius, which looks feels a bit cool. But our forecast on the Gold Coast this week, it's one of the things that's nice about being back from Sydney. Get better weather. What are we heading for this week? Today's 26. Then we've got 31, 29, 30, 29, 29. And we just have this really constant weather here on the Gold Coast. It usually only differs like a couple of degrees each day, but it's looking good. Now, I was going to make another insightful point, and I completely forgot about it. I'll remember that later on. Benjamin, the Have I Been Pwned rebrand looks amazing. Has that impacted growth on any of the social platforms? Well, first of all, I do have the Have I Been Pwned merch on today, merch.haveibeenpwned.com. This is actually the only piece of merch I have that I'm wearing, so I need to order some more because I do like it. I really like this logo. It's just, I don't know, it's clean. It is a nod to the heritage. It's good. Has it impacted the growth on social platforms? It's really hard to say because how do you measure it, right? Like how do you measure growth and traction and everything? You could look at the volume of people that come to the website or the number of subscribers or things like this. But to be honest, all of that is largely driven by data breach news, which is a good segue into what we're going to talk about. And what I mean by data breach news is either we load some very large significant data breach, and I would say that that's something that happens 4 times a year. We have a lot of very insignificant data breaches, at least in terms of either size or general interest. Or we have industry news, which drives a lot of people to have I been pwned. So a few months ago when there was like that mother of all breaches bullshit, we had unprecedented traffic, literally the largest amount of traffic we'd seen, because someone had cobbled together a bunch of different data breaches that were exposed and it had made headlines. And we got massive traffic from it. So that's what drives the traffic. I don't think we're really getting people going, wow, that logo is really cool. I'm going to go to Have I Been Pwned and do a search. Doesn't tend to work that way. But yeah, who knows? We're just going to keep pushing content out at the moment. When I say content out, pushing out demos and things, obviously pushing out new breaches, which is also a good segue into what we're going to talk about here. Let's jump into that. I put here breaches of the week. Now let me go to my Twitter profile and talk through these. Part of I think the problem or the difficulty in switching from, it's not switching, but using Blue Sky in the same way that I've been using Twitter is that so many of the organizations that over the course of the last decade and a half plus have created footprints on Twitter are not on Blue Sky. So if I have a little bit of a spin through here and for example, I have mentioned Renault. So Renault, the car company, has had a data breach. Now, that's one of I'm going to go all over the place here. Renault UK. Now, if I was to take a bet without having looked, I suspect there is not a Renault UK presence on Blue Sky. It used to be simpler, it was basically like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, maybe Instagram or Renault. I don't know. I know that if I go to Renault in the UK, I'm probably not going to see, where is this, Renault UK? I'm probably not going to see a link to their Blue Sky account. And that's the sort of thing that's just going to take a very long time. Yeah, so what's Renault got listed? Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn. So as far as I know, they don't have a presence on that platform. Now, it's not like it's a showstopper, but I can't tag the company. I can't engage with the company on that platform. And I just don't know that Blue Sky is ever going to achieve that, but we'll see. Anywho, data breaches. Renault. So they have, let's just go backwards through the week of things here. They've disclosed one here. Sorry to inform about a cyber attack on one of our third-party providers. Notice how many of these breaches these days are a third-party provider, and equally, how frequently that third-party provider is not named. Earlier last year it was Snowflake, so a third party, and then many companies wouldn't name it, but then we figured out it was Snowflake. Or many other times we've seen people get into Salesforce accounts. We'll talk about that one in a moment too. Or similar, and I just, for the life of me, I don't understand. Well, I do. It's lawyers. But it doesn't make sense from a transparency perspective. Let's try that again. It doesn't make sense from a transparency perspective not to name the third party. So here's what's been leaked. First name and surname, gender, because apparently Renault, who makes cars, needs to know your gender, which... All right. Now, having said that, it's not a particularly useful piece of information in terms of, let's say, identity theft. Particularly not when you can usually derive that with a pretty high degree of accuracy from the first name anyway. So, phone number, email address, postal address, vehicle identification number being your VIN, vehicle registration number, I assume, being your license plate number. Yeah, okay. So what should we do? Accessing information. And they finish by saying data privacy is of the utmost importance to us. We deeply regret that this has occurred and wish to apologize again. All right, well, good on them for that. I think saying you're sorry is a good start. Yes, just scrolling back through my thread. Richard and I did do a Runners Radio as well, which I know that Richard put not just on Twitter, but he put it on Mastodon and Blue Sky as well. So go and check out Richard and I this week on Runners Radio. Thrift books is another one. It feels like every day there is a different thing. Hello, we wanted to let you know of a configuration error in the checkout confirmation page on Thrift Books that may have allowed your name, address, email address, and order summary to be viewed by an unauthorized actor. No payment info. They've found that's a pretty timely disclosure. It was earlier last month. Investigation determined no payment card info, passwords, or other sensitive personal info was accessible or disclosed. And then they've got the links here off to the FTC in the US about avoiding scams. Oh, I remembered what I was going to say about that political thing too. We'll come back to that after this segment. WestJet confirms a data breach, exposing customers' passports. So that's not great. I guess that's one of the things that's relevant for an airline to collect. This is on Bleeping Computer. 1.2 million customers. I'm sure I've flown on them at some point. Maybe I gave them my passport. So their leak includes requested accommodations, filed complaints. Now, I wonder if this is from the same actors that were responsible for Hawaiian, for Qantas. There was definitely a period there. In fact, we saw warnings from the government, our government, and I'm sure other ones as well, about targeted attacks against airlines. And inevitably what happens is the folks behind these figure out the mechanics of how an industry sector such as the airline industry works, how they record information such as flights and collect passenger info, how they run help desk. And they, in many cases, social engineer their way in, which is pretty wild. You know, all these technical controls. Someone just calls up the help desk and gets a password. Look at the comments as we go here. Eddie just bought a book from Thrift Books. Good one. James, another thing I love about Mastodon is they support RSS. I get everything in one feed like Troy's blog. Even YouTube goes through RSS. I think one of the things we're sort of realizing here is maybe we're just getting more and more ways of consuming information. Sometimes it's the same information. It's either posted to different platforms or it's exposed by different media or technical consumption method. And we're just getting a bigger spread. Maybe that's it. Could be. Now, what else is here? Asahi, Japanese beer. They were breached as well. They also got cybered. Let's have a look at the details of this one. Japanese brewing giant Asahi has been hit by a cyber attack that's caused a, quote, systems failure, affecting the company's shipping. Speaking of which, I think Jaguar Land Rover is still in really bad shape, and they've got, it was something like 4% of British GDP, or some crazy high number from that one company impacted by that incident. Company said its orders and shipment operations in Japan and customer service operations had been suspended. The opportunity cost of these data breaches is just ginormous when they hit big companies that are down for long periods of time. It's kind of wild. I mean, all right, so here's the JLR reference in this story. In the UK, a number of big businesses have been hit by cyber attacks in recent months, including Harrods, Jaguar Land Rover, Marks & Spencer's, and the Co-op. And it looks like they've already picked up some of the folks responsible for those. And if you're a kid breaking into these, and it is usually a kid or a very young adult, stop doing that. Because if you keep doing that, you will almost certainly end up in the clink, because that does seem to be what happens to most of these kids involved in this. Now, the thing I remembered on the politics thing, after the Charlie Kirk shooting, I went into ChatGPT and I was just trying to understand, like, what it feels like there's a very different political leaning in the US, and I'm sure Richard has ideas on this, because Richard's been basically everywhere in the world. Even more so than me. But I find that every time you can go to pretty much all of Western Europe or the UK or even Canada and obviously Australia and New Zealand, all the sort of the Western countries, and then you go to the US and there's just things that are just so like fundamentally culturally different in a place that otherwise feels very similar. Anyway, I was asking ChatGPT the other day about sort of the political leanings, and effectively what it said is, if you look at the places just mentioned, pretty much all of Western Europe, and Poland was the outlier, the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, etc., and you look at our political spectrum, our sort of right side of politics, to use the US term, is probably very moderate in the US. And then they've got this other spectrum which goes well beyond what's normal in places like this. And particularly the integration of things like religion and politics, where for the most part, the rest of the world tries so hard to keep these two things apart so that people can do whatever they want on the religious side and separate that from the politics. But the US is so, they seem to be so ingrained, and that we find different. Let's just say different. I think it's the safest option. G'day, Joe. Thank you for joining in. Aaron? Dale. Unless for deliveries or similar, I don't give my name to websites. I give initials, Max. To be fair, I don't think a name is required for delivery, and a fake missing name would mean no PII on the label. Yeah. But then how sensitive is a name? How easily discoverable is a name? It's a hard one to quantify, isn't it? Because how do you define a level of risk to, say, a name? And for that matter, how do you define a level of risk to something like a phone number associated to it as well? Like, we know how it can be used in bad ways. How likely is it to happen? And then what are the places where we actually have to provide it? And then what happens if we fake it? Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting. What else has happened? What was on my list here? CERN. So this week, we are at the end of the week. This week we gave CERN access to Have I Been Pwned in the same way as we've done with 40 other governments. Now, I sort of wrote this blog post about CERN and said it's hard to explain the significance of CERN because it's actually hard to understand. This is another thing Richard could explain, I'm sure, but it's hard to actually understand the physics that CERN engages in. Now, I've been to CERN twice. Charlotte and I were there a few months ago on our European Alpine tour, and we're also there in 2019. And where many of us, at least in this industry, might know CERN from is the birthplace of the World Wide Web. So Tim Berners-Lee wrote the spec for the World Wide Web at CERN in the early 90s. And that is obviously a massive part of my life. A couple of years after that, I started using the spec he'd written to write websites. And then history happened. Now here I am running a data breach website. So CERN was enormously important because of that, but it's also very well known for the Hadron Collider, the world's largest machine that accelerates particles to very close to the speed of light, and it sends them, which will tell me everything I get wrong now, but it sends them around this 24-kilometer odd loop, something like 11,000 times a second, and then it smashes them together, and it's just like, let's see what happens. Is that right? Something like that. Anyway, it's just crazy levels of physics. And when we were there in 2019, we went down this great big elevator shaft down to see the Hadron Collider. And you just look at it, you look at this one tiny little segment of what is a massive loop around the mountains of France and Switzerland. So CERN's in Geneva, and literally the border between France and Switzerland goes through the middle of CERN. And you look at it and go, like, where would you even begin to debug this thing? It's like if my particle isn't accelerating, like, where do you even begin? The science and the physics behind it is amazing, and they're trying to answer many of the foundational questions about physics and the beginnings of the universe, etc., which is massively, massively impressive. And both on that trip and the trip we had just a few months ago, we also went to the antimatter factory, which also sounds really wild because it's like, what is antimatter and how do you make it? And we were there with the physicist as well as a bunch of other tech folks. And my understanding of it is, he says, yeah, there you go. So Richard's mentioned antimatter. My understanding, the way he explained it, is something to the effect of everything being equal and opposite in reactions and so on. At the beginning of the universe, with the Big Bang, if matter was created, then there must have been antimatter because they have to be able to cancel each other out. And then we've got lots of magnets, and we try to create antimatter, and I don't even know what it looks like. All I know is there's lots of magnets and lots of warning signs, which was cool. I think just going there and having the significance of it explained is cool. But to bring it back on topic, and maybe to put a nice political bent on things for a bit, CERN is funded by EU member states, and then I think you can also have associated member states. But the bottom line is that CERN, for all the significance and importance of what they do, is funded by what averages out at the cost of a cup of coffee per person in Europe per year. So imagine the number of people in Europe and the significance of what CERN does, and their funding amounts to a cup of coffee each. So they are an intergovernment agency. They are not a government per se. There are lots of interesting things about how they fit in between Switzerland and France. Then what's the governing law, and then which police can come in if something happens. And they even mentioned, when I was there the other day, they said, I think in the past I've had like an open site kind of thing where people can come in and see CERN, like the public. And it was something around, if they come in through the Switzerland side, then they can't go out through the France side, because then that sort of circumvents border control, which is very loose anyway, but there are still gates and the ability to stop people when you drive through. Anyway, lots of really cool stuff. So we really wanted to make sure, when we were there, they sort of said, look, can we get access to our domains in the same way as a government? And we kind of went, well, you're not actually a government, but you do really, really important, really cool stuff. And the reason we're even here having this discussion is because of things that were invented here at CERN. So ultimately, we've set them up as a government. They're an intergovernment. They have the same level of free access as any of the other 40 governments that are there on Have I Been Pwned. And hopefully that will help them collide more particles and do things like that. That was the thing I was going to say. The focus there is it is just all about the science and the physics of what they're doing. And things like politics and religion and countries of origin and all this sort of stuff, it's just like no one gives a shit about it. You know, they were making the point on many occasions of how many people there are from countries that are otherwise at war with each other, literally at war with each other. And then they come into CERN and they're all there for one purpose, and the rest of it just seems to get left behind. And it was just a really, I think particularly in the climate at the moment, it was just a really sort of beautiful thing to see, where everyone was just so positive and focused on their work and their science, and all of that rubbish just seemed to get left outside CERN. So that was really nice. And everyone there is just extraordinarily, exceptionally cool. Being able, on both those occasions, to go and do a talk at CERN as well was cool. And you literally walk past Tim Berners-Lee's office where he designed the World Wide Web, and you go a few doors down into the auditorium. And on both those occasions, I get to like walk past the place the web was designed, and then go and talk about the problems with the web. Like it's kind of mind-blowing. It was really, really good fun. Okay, lots of comments here. A lot of CERN stuff. Richard says, one of the great unknowns in physics is why the proportion of matter and antimatter isn't the same. If folks here haven't listened to Richard's Geek Outs before, Google them. Go and listen to them. They are awesome, and I've listened to many, many over the years that have been extraordinarily insightful and entertaining. So thanks to Richard for that. The placeholder that is dark energy is an important question. Is it a fix for correcting problems with the standard model? Like dark matter, we presume it exists because gravitation doesn't work right without it. Very deep. All right. 2 new data breaches, and I'll talk about one last thing before I wrap up. Now, these are going to lead us into this last discussion. So these 2 data breaches here are from several years ago. Latest pilot jobs. Very niche website. 119,000 records breached in 2022. Data includes email addresses, usernames, names, and unsalted MD5 password hashes. 81% already have been pwned. Side note, when I see MD5 hashes and I want to figure out whether they're salted or not, because and really the only relevance of that is the tweet that I put out and the description of the blog, the description of the breach rather. Normally what I've done is I've just taken individual MD5 hashes, 32 character hashes, put them into Google. Sooner or later, someone's going to use one that's a dumb one, and it will show up in a search result because there's all these websites that have effectively Googleable rainbow tables that have hashes and plain text pairs. And if I can put a hash in and I get a result somewhere, then I know it's not salted, because if it was salted, then it wouldn't have been caught in Google anyway. Anywho, this is actually really easy to do with ChatGPT. There are lots of good use cases for AI. I don't know if you know this. It's not all about creating like deep fakes and getting artists out of a job. So this time I just grabbed a couple of dozen rows of hashes and I whacked them into ChatGPT and I said, can you tell me if any of these are salted? And it takes those hashes and it searches the web, and then it comes back and it gives you the plain text candidate. And that's cool. Like, that is a great way of saving me work, because it's taking something that I might have spent 10 minutes on before and it's doing it in 10 seconds. So, latest pilot job, MD5 hashes are not salted, discovered via ChatGPT. That was 2022. The next one here is Home Refill. It's a now defunct Brazilian e-commerce platform, breached in 2020. Data include 187,000 unique email addresses, names, phone numbers, dates of birth, and salted password hashes. Now, it does help when there is a column that is called salt. That's a bit of a giveaway. 87% already have been pwned. These are both old incidents. And the reason they've popped up here today is I'm literally like, while I was in Sydney and I had some time to do a bit of extra work, I went down through my inbox and I was like, how many of these emails I've got about data breaches, some of them dating back multiple years, can I now find that there's been either public disclosure on, or they've been floating around enough in enough public places that the organization really should know about it. And I'll load those. Now, I've got probably hundreds of incidents like that, literally hundreds. And then there's all the new stuff that keeps coming up. And it leads me into this next point here about brainstorming the data breach pipeline. And this is the brainstorming bit, is where you contribute. So whether you're on the chat now or you listen to this later on, I actually need contribution on this, contribution of ideas. And I guess the challenge here is that there's me and only me doing the data breach stuff. Now, Stefan does code. That's great. Stefan is flat chat doing code. Charlotte does tickets and finances and insurances and lawyers and everything else. And it's just me doing data breaches. And for the most part, I'm entirely at the mercy of people popping up and saying, hey, I found a thing. And then I have to go through everything from the verification, potentially the disclosure, definitely going out and looking to see if there's already a disclosure, if there's already press. And I get a window like this. Now, obviously it's been successful, so that's good. But I would like to find a more formalized way of people being able to contribute and correlate all of this noise that is out there, and not only help to identify where these incidents exist, but for folks that do find data to be able to analyze it, verify it, document it, possibly even disclose it. I need to take all of this noise and try and focus it a little bit more. Because really, it's kind of sucky that here we are multiple years after both these incidents, and I'm loading that data. We have long held the view, we being Stefan and Charlotte and I, that the most impactful time to load data from a breach is as soon as possible after it happens. And it's kind of logical, because that's the point at which many people don't know that they've been in a data breach. They don't know they need to change that one password they've used everywhere. They don't know that they need to be more conscious about potential identity theft attacks. That's the critical time to get this right. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is with resources, with people to be able to help. Now, I'm not sure what that looks like. This is the brainstorming bit. I'm not sure whether we should literally employ someone to do this. There would have to be someone that lives in this world. But then we've got to be very careful that we're not employing someone who's on the too shady side of things, because we're effectively financially incentivizing someone who may be involved in criminal activity. I'm not sure whether we should do something which is maybe even a bit more badge orientated, like you get to be a contributor and you get badges and status, or what is it that appeals to people who want to contribute this data. I'm not sure whether it should be some more sort of open foundation thing where we have many people in a community correlating this stuff. But then, of course, you've got to be very cautious, because we could be talking about data sets from breaches where the company doesn't yet know about it. And we don't want to make things worse by communicating something that needs to be, you know what I mean? There's all of these nuances about it. And so far I've had this idea just going around in my head in a very sort of divergent fashion, and I've not been able to converge it into an idea I can implement. So give it some thought. You can figure out a good way to start correlating all of this noise and trying to fill those blind spots as well. So I haven't made this list public for various reasons, but I have a list. We'll go through this now, called data breaches. There's a small double-digit number of accounts here, and these are different accounts online that post information about data breaches, legit ones. But I'm going through this, and I would say on average there's half a dozen posts an hour or something. And these are everything from companies that have been ransomware through to, here's a good example. 52 minutes ago, Dark Web Informer. The threat actor claims Apple data breach, offering 9 gigabytes of files, including APIs and Java components. Now, as soon as you read that, you're like, doesn't sound like Apple. Who knows? But 3 minutes before that, a different account here has tweeted about Open Directory exposure and a whole bunch of exposed files. And it just goes on and on. A lot of Telegram channels and so on here. What's this one? Rubian hack sale, 3 terabytes of Iran military data. And it's like, that doesn't sound so legit. One that I shared earlier today, because it does sound really significant. Hackmanic. I have spent time with Hackmanic in Dubai before. Really good people there. New data leak by Scattered Lapsus Hunters. That's the collective's name, exposes Salesforce customers. Dozens of global companies involved in large-scale extortion campaign. So this collective is trying to shake Salesforce down for what I assume is a very large amount of money, because they're alleging they've got 1.1 terabytes of FedEx, 273 gigabytes of Aeromexico, 153 gigabytes of Qantas Airways. Incidentally, noted just yesterday, Qantas Airways now has a permanent injunction on that data, not a temporary injunction. So if all of this goes public, we can process all of it and have it been pwned, except for Qantas. So they have tried to make crime illegal to stop the... you know how I feel about that. But there are some really, really big numbers here. I actually had, the penny had not dropped that included Qantas there. I don't even know if I can talk. I think I can talk about it. I just can't touch the data. Well, I know I'm in there, and I know the kids are in there, and Charlotte's in there, because I've had all the breach notifications. So they've got all of this data, and they're saying that unless they're provided with, I assume again, as a truckload of money, by the 10th of October, they're dumping it. Anyway, the point is that's just one of many, 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 many different things that is happening. And I can stretch myself across a tiny slice of it. So I would really, really love to hear ideas from people about how we can crowdsource not just the data, but things like the verification. You know, someone this morning popped up and said there's been a particular site that's, I won't say what it is yet until I verified it, has been ransomed. Their site was defaced. They managed to find the Onion site. They've sent me a link to a SQLite database. I need to go through and analyze that, figure out whether it's legitimate or not, figure out whether or not disclosures required. Probably not if their entire site's been defaced. I think they know about that, and figure out how to deal with it. Some really big names here on this. You know, I will share the link in the thread here, and then I'll come back and read some comments. This is just a public tweet. Vietnam Airlines, Toyota, Air France, and KLM, Disney, Hulu, Adidas. Now, from memory, Air France and KLM are already in the news as well, as was Qantas. Disney / Hulu. What else are we going to hear? McDonald's, TransUnion, AAA, Home Depot, Google AdSense, Cisco, Marriott, Walgreens, Pandora. Well, Pandora in the news recently. One of the different things I know now, because my wife and daughter like Pandora bracelets, and we have to go to Pandora every time we go to a different country or city. KFC, Saks, Gap, Cartier, I know they're in the news too. Chanel, I know they're in the news. Wow, Puma, HBO Max, Fujifilm, and IKEA. So that's, note, all victims are listed with ransom deadlines set for 10 October. Discover more at hackrisk.io, which is from the Hack Labs folks. Like, that's just, we're going to need a bigger database. It's like, whew. All right, let me have a look at the comments here. Richard's just pointing out CERN does have the largest antimatter factory on the planet. I'm going to leave Richard to geek out on all the physics stuff. Aaron, did I solve the SSH problem last week? Yes, I waited. I went away. So my SSH problem was I was using rsync to download a file that was nearly 3 terabytes of Stealer logs, so something I now have to process. I couldn't get more than 10 megabytes a second down, even though I have a gigabit connection. And all the obvious stuff wasn't working. I definitely wasn't throttled. It was definitely not one client. It was whether I tried SSHing in from my Windows machine or SFTPing in, or SSHing in from my Synology Linux box. I couldn't get faster than that. I was about to go away anyway to Sydney, and I was like, stuff it, I'll just leave it. So I came home and it's finished. So I've solved the problem. I'm not sure of what the root cause was, Aaron, but a few people suggested the transport layer encryption. And I'm not sure how configurable that was. I'm not sure with SSH whether you get to choose your cipher suite or something like you would with the TLS connection. But anyway, it just time solved that. James likes the idea of using Google as a rainbow table, which I've done for many years. It's very handy for those simple checks for simple passwords. Sam, how's CoinHive going? Also, how's the IoT stuff coming along? Yeah, CoinHive, let's see how much traffic has been this week according to Cloudflare. It's one of these things where I would really like to invest some time to figure out why it still gets so much traffic. It's kind of wild, but I've rebooted my computer, so now I need to access my password manager again with my passkey, and I'm a human. And we'll get into Cloudflare. So CoinHive, for those not familiar with the term, was the service that allowed you to put a JavaScript-based crypto miner on a website. And people did this legitimately to their own websites as a means of monetization of their traffic. But then, of course, because it was a way of making money from visitors to a website, anyone who could compromise a website was just like dumping CoinHive onto the website. And maybe it sort of started with the best of intentions, but it really didn't end up that way. So at one point it shuttered, and for reasons I still don't understand, somebody gave me the domain, and I started serving up my own JavaScript to all the websites that were embedding. It wasn't just websites, but it was things like compromised routers as well. And when it saw non-HTTPS traffic, it could inject CoinHive into those insecure sites, which is pretty wild. So I own that, and I'm serving up my own script saying, hey, this website's been compromised. Go and read here about CoinHive. 1.83 million requests in the last 30 days. Ooh, feels like a lot, doesn't it? Now I can see the referrer headers here as well. Rather, I can see the referrer websites. It's just weird. 615,000 requests from forum.oldversion.com. What the hell is that? Is this safe to open here? Let's figure it out. Forum.oldversion.com. Now, we're not seeing the actual path here. It's, oldversion.com. It looks like a nerd website. Old versions of software. Wow. Okay, so someone has managed to get CoinHive on that website. Now, failed to load resource. Cert date invalid. CoinHive.min. Is my CoinHive certificate wrong? That's weird. Open new tab. Oh, wow. Why is my CoinHive certificate not right? That's ironic. my CoinHive certificate, what is going on there, is invalid. What's happened to my certificate? Expires. Why is it serving up a certificate from 2023? Okay, right. Now I've got another job to do, because it should be Cloudflare that manages that certificate. Huh. That's really weird. SSL TLS and Cloudflare. Advanced Certificate Manager. Encryption mode is full. All right, I'll figure that out later on. Thank you for the reminder. Now I've got another job to do today. That's strange. So yeah, obviously there's still a lot of traffic going there, but if that certificate is invalid, then it's not serving up the content to people who come by it. So I wonder if that's why the number feels so large, actually, because it feels larger than the last time I looked at it. The IoT stuff is, business as usual. I've still been doing more AI stuff. My main problem at the moment is I have realized, and I've found other references to this, the Ubiquiti doorbell that I have, the speaker always sounds really crackly. And I was like, is it a hardware fault? Is it I went down the rabbit hole of, is it the encoding of the media that I'm playing? Eventually discovered that The other Ubiquiti devices I have that have a speaker in them do exactly the same thing, so it's not hardware. I found a public reference of people saying that they're having the same problem. There was a firmware update at some point that made everything crackly. So I do have, I'm going to actually remind myself to, hey Siri, remind my Ubiquiti fairy today about the crackly speakers. Right. I call him my Ubiquiti fairy because he sends Ubiquiti stuff like a, I don't know, like a tooth fairy. He just comes and leaves stuff. So yeah, I want to get that right because I want to do more, particularly now that we're doing more stuff with AI. I'd really like to do more AI stuff via the doorbell, and particularly at some point in time be able to get to like a full duplex AI conversation with whoever is at the door. I think it'd be really cool. So that's on the list. What else we got in here? Dale says, are there any mechanisms you use before posting to X to try to contact companies? Yes, there are. Security TXT, who is one of the things I'm going to do for this Intercop conference I mentioned earlier. A lot of this, the thesis of this, the theme of Intercop is around cyber prevention, and a lot of the prevention is around inevitably use. I've mentioned this many times before. Kids, young adults doing cybercrime. And the angle I'm going to go with my talk is that I think a large part of what's difficult for these kids doing the cybercrime is actually disclosing the things that they find. And I've had so many people say to me, I didn't think the company would take it seriously, or they didn't take it seriously, so I'm dumping it publicly. So I'd like to try and bridge that gap a bit between finding vulnerabilities and getting them disclosed and the company being receptive, because I think that's a part of why we're seeing so much stuff just dumped publicly. And that's also related to security.txt. Now, my theory is, and this is going to be something that's really easy to check, I bet you that of all of the 900 plus data breaches that have been pwned, I will be surprised if there are more than maybe 10 that have a security.txt on them. And I know one of them is Dropbox, and I think LinkedIn does as well. So for the vast majority of these instances, to be honest, mate, I don't even bother checking. It's that rare to have a security.txt file. But yeah, I only go on Twitter X to ask for a security contact after I have tried other mechanisms and got no reply. I can't tell you which one it is, but I had one company reply that I'd contacted privately via, I think this one was via Facebook Messenger days ago. Which channel was it by? The problem is I try on so many different channels now, but I sent it to them on Facebook Messenger as well as via their published email address and so on. And the company replied and said, sorry, we can't reply right now. So, well, but you just did. I've just told you you've had a data breach and you've got millions of records. Well, I didn't say millions, but I said you've had a data breach. Yeah, anyway, so that's hard. James says, I wonder if there's a way to fingerprint breaches. Being able to kick out old breaches could reduce the noise. So certainly one thing that's been in the back of my mind is for the file that is in circulation, even just being able to have a published hash of it. Have we seen this file before? But then, are you hashing the archive, which is in circulation? Are you hashing the file that is in the archive? What if there are multiple files in the archive? Very often, particularly with some popular hacking forums, you see the file taken, other stuff added, other files added, and then re-archived with an acronym of that website after the file name. So which one are you fingerprinting? Not to say we shouldn't do it, but you see the problem. Dale says, TransUnion's on the list. They're a credit check company. Yeah. IKEA. Yeah. James says, people like me have site-specific emails using your own domain. I wonder if we could register with Have I Been Pwned as contacts Troy could reach out to us some kind of automated way. Well, when I need to, I reach out to Have I Been Pwned subscribers. We're just about to hit 5.7 million of those. And I get their assistance doing verification, but that's very laborious. Disclosure is very laborious. And one thing that that I think I might work with our legal folks on a little bit as well. We don't have our own ones, but we have a big digital law firm that we use for things like this, is to maybe talk about how we can streamline more. James, he finds our domain and we can verify it's legit. Perhaps it could be automated. I think the same thing. James says, with public-private keys, maybe we could even sign the email address somehow. For the most part, the verification's not that hard. So it's not the verification that's the problem. It's going through the steps of doing that, which is time consuming, because if we take it from the point where I'm aware that there is a breached file, all the way up to the point where I've now verified it, I know it's legitimate, it's probably usually 15 or 20 minutes. Like it's not too bad, but you multiply that over and over and over again. And I'm just wondering, the more I think about it, maybe I just need a person living in this ecosystem who can go and do that themselves. Who is the party that can be trusted to handle this data as well. This is the other big problem. I mean, the only people that work for me, I sleep with one of them. Like, I trust her. And Stefan, who we've known for approaching a decade, and we know very, very well, and we trust completely with everything. And, you know, how many other people are there like that? So particularly if you start to give them access to the data, to the PII, to potentially really, really sensitive things. So, you know, short of training the children up to do this, and maybe it's also something, it's like the founder's paradox. It's something I've just got to let go of a little bit as a founder and trust in others. Anyway, on that note, if you have other good ideas, please let me know. I'm going to keep trying to maybe at least refine these thoughts to the point where I can even write a blog post about it, and then go, this is the direction I'm thinking of heading, and then we massage it. But I have to solve this problem. Okay, folks, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for listening. I'll come back to you Friday next week. I've got 2 or 3 weeks of doing this back at home before we head back to Europe again, and I'll catch you next week.